Hi students, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian and I'm streaming to you live from beautiful Budapest here, the capital city of Hungary, located in Central Europe. I hope everybody is having a fantastic weekend so far and getting some time to both study and relax as well. This is a members chat class. Of course, everybody is welcome to watch. Hi, Jessica Ron. Hi, Yexton. Good to see a couple members in class already. And this class is a question and answer session with students. If you have any questions about the IELTS exam, the way that it works, the computer-based, paper-based, different types of questions and the reading, listening sections, and so on, now is your chance to ask me and get some answers to your inquiries. While we wait for some more members to join in, some announcements. This lesson is brought to you by aehelp.com. For academic IELTS, make sure to visit us there. And for the general version, check us out at gieltshelp.com. I'll show you those sites in a moment. Now, in the last 24 hours, we had some networking database issues, and we're sorry about that for students who are using the website. So because we had these problems in the last 24 hours with the websites, we created a code to give you a 30% discount, but this is only for the next 24 hours. It's just kind of an apology to say sorry that you couldn't log into your student account. So if you go to the websites today, you can use this code FIX30 to get a 30% discount. The websites look like this. This is the academic version of the website here with the blue background. The general looks like this with the green background. You can click that big red button to join. And then I'll just darken up the screen here a little bit so you can see where you need to enter that code. So here you see the checkout form. And on the checkout form, you see this green button here that says use coupon code. So you click on that and then you enter FIX30 to get that 30% discount. So today is a great time to get the course because it's very, very rare that we have any kind of connectivity issue with our websites. They're very reliable. We use Amazon Cloud servers. All right. Hi, Ferdovs. Hi, Amarjit. Hi, Rajveer. Let's get a little bit of brightness back in the image here. Of course, you can use our apps, Academic IELTS Help, General IELTS Help, from your Android and Apple app stores. And you can always send me an email if you have questions, adrian@aehelp.com. While we're waiting for some members to join into this class, ladies and gents, start thinking about your questions that you might have regarding the IELTS or even our products. So now is really your chance, Rahul Preet, Rajveer, Amarjit, Yextan, Ferdovs, and Jessica Run, to ask me some questions, okay? Any question is a good question. Don't be shy. If you're thinking it, it's a very good chance that somebody else is also thinking about it as well. Students, you can get our books from Amazon. Search for AE Helps Academic IELTS and GE Helps General IELTS. You can get the paperback or the digital versions of our books there. And again, today we have question and answer session that we're doing right now for the members. And after that, we will have speaking part 3. As usual, no class tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, and then I'm back on Wednesday with speaking part 1. And then, of course, lots more classes after that. I will post that schedule in the YouTube community board so you can see it there. Hi, Shang Hung. All right. So let's get into this class. Jessica Ron says, hello, sir. Some teachers are saying that general line is mandatory in task 2, but some say direct paraphrase is better. Jessica Run, you're asking about the task 2 writing. I'm guessing. Um, Again, remember, just Karan, that for task 2, you need to do more than just paraphrase the question to really get those higher band scores like band 7 or more, or even 6.5. You have to give the hook, the background, and the thesis in the introduction. The teachers who are saying that you just kind of give a general line or a direct paraphrase, they're not really explaining the true technique for writing an introductory paragraph. So my best answer to you, Jaskaran, is follow always and practice always the correct essay style. Okay, what I'm teaching you in these classes, and just run the essay style that I'm teaching you in classes. Okay, and this is a standard essay style for especially for expository and persuasive essays. Okay, so let me kind of, Jaskaran, let me kind of deal with your question in a different way. So Jaskaran Singh is you're basically asking me, Jaskaran, what is the best way to write the introductory paragraph for task 2? I think that's your question. Is that correct, Jaskaran? So is this really your question here? If I ask it as an open question, what is the best way to write the introductory paragraph for task 2? If that's not your question, let me know, because I don't really want to answer something different. Okay, it is, right? That's what I thought. So my answer to you, Jaskaran, is don't listen to John, Sarah, Peter, and all these other teachers. Listen to what the standard says, okay? So your answer is the best, which means the highest scoring task 2 essays give a what's called standard essay introduction. For persuasive, if you want to simplify, some people say argumentative essays, and expository essays. Okay? Expository essays are essays that explain. All right? So the standard for that, okay, the standard is A, hook, plus B, background, plus C, direct thesis. And a lot of students who have finished our courses, our online software, Jaskaran, and actually went and did the IELTS, and they did this, so they actually did a proper hook, background, direct thesis for their introduction. They all improved their writing score by at least 1 band. Sometimes we have students go from a band 6 to a band 8 when they make this change and use correct essay structure. So there are no tricks, there are no kind of this teacher said, that teacher said. This is the standard. This is what you do in high school, in the US, in Canada, in the UK. This is what you do in college and university. If you go to a university English class, and I challenge any student to do this, and go and talk to a professor and say, hey, prof, for a persuasive essay, what is an introductory paragraph? They'll say, well, it should have some kind of a hook, a background, and a thesis. Okay? So that's what the examiners are looking for. Remember, the people marking your exam, they went to these professors, these high schools, these classes. This is what they learned. Okay? It's really strange for me that there are so many IELTS books out there and teachers out there who don't teach this standard. It's kind of strange, but that's the way it is. Okay? I think a lot of these books and teachers are teaching like band 5.56, but these days that's not enough for school and immigration. All right, so I see other questions coming up as well. So Amarjeet says, what changes are done in IELTS? I heard about it. Okay. I know there's this big hype about changes to the IELTS exam this year, but there's really not much going on, just a little bit with the listening section. So Amarjit says, what are the changes to the IELTS exam in 2020? Okay. So first of all, students, they're never going to do any major well, I don't want to say never, but it's unlikely that they're going to do any big change all of a sudden to the IELTS exam. That's because there are so many people around the world studying for this test, so many teachers, materials that are of course, teaching this exam. So you can't just suddenly completely change it. That would be really bad. When you have a system in place like the IELTS, which is so popular, I think there are about 3 million people who take IELTS each year right now. You can't just suddenly do a major change. So changes are just going to be always little minor changes. And Amarjit, the answer to your question is just some minor changes to the listening section. Instructions or format, and I don't want to say format, instructions. And I'll show you what that is, okay? So, real quick, this shouldn't be confusing for you. So here is one of our exam books, and we'll be making these changes to our exam books this year as well. So you'll see these changes later. Let me go to a different exam, not the curriculum test. Let's jump to page 60. Okay. All right. Okay. So here we go. Okay. So the changes this year to the IELTS, they're really kind of basic. So here you see listening section 1, and there's an example given, and you listen to that example as well. That's gone. Okay, you're not going to have this example in section 1. So section 1 will just be like section 2, 3, 4 with no example. That means you have to be a little bit faster to focus and to hear the accent and get ready to answer. Okay. So that's one change, Amarjit, is there's no example in section 1 of the listening. Also notice how here it says section 1 for the listening. So what's happening is they're going to change this word to the word part. So instead of section 1, you're going to hear part 1. Okay, part 1, part 2, part 3, which makes more sense because this is the listening section. So it's very confusing when teachers are saying listening section, reading section, and then suddenly it's listening section, section 1. It makes more sense to say listening section, part 1. So for clarity, to be clear, it actually makes sense to say part 1 instead of section 1. So that's another change. And in the audio before, you heard references to page numbers. So this is page 81. So in the audio, you could hear them say something like, now on page 81, you will. So they're stopping that. There's no more reference to page numbers. Okay, there's still reference to question numbers. So that's the 3 changes. Okay, no reference to page numbers. Sections become part, and there's no section 1, or I should say part 1 example. Okay, Amarjit, that's it. There's nothing else. You don't have to panic. As far as I know, they're not changing any other part of the exam. Okay, it's just a small change. Okay, so that's my answer for that. So just some minor changes to the listening section instructions. The only one that will kind of affect you is that missing example. All right. Okay, so Rajamanikam E is asking, do we have any extra checking time in the computer-based exam, like in the paper-based exam? No. Yeah, you don't, okay? So there's no time to... Okay, so let me write that here. So yeah, there's differences in the paper-based and the computer-based. So Rajam... It's a nice long name, Rajamanikam. Probably not pronouncing it all that well, am I? But asking, do we have the 10-minute transfer answers to answer sheet time in the computer-based listening section as in the paper-based? No. Okay. The answer just quickly and simply is no, you do not, because your answers are recorded. But you do have time to check your answers, like in the paper-based. So it's even more important than in the paper-based to check your answers. Okay, so like I said before, there are some advantages to doing the paper-based, some advantages to doing the computer-based. One advantage of the paper-based is you do have that 10 minutes just because it logistically makes sense, okay? So you do have that 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. You don't have that 10 minutes in the computer-based exam, okay? Because you're writing your answers directly into the fields provided by the computer form. But you do have time to check them and you can change them. Okay, so don't change them unless you're really sure. And that's the for the paper-based as well. Okay, it's a good question. All right. Welcome, Rosa. Make sure to send me an email so I can send you those exclusive video links. Okay. My email, again, Rosa, is adrian@aehelp.com. Okay. All right. Let's see. So, Yexton is asking, sir, I'm a little bit confused about the language in the speaking. In the speaking section, do I need to speak formal or informal? That's a really, really good question, Yexton. Okay, so Yexton is asking, in the speaking interview, should I use formal or informal language? That's a great question. Okay. The answer is both. Okay. It's a really good question, Yexton. I'll explain why. Okay. So, what are the differences between formal and informal, right? That's the first question here. So, what's the difference? Okay. So, in informal language, we use contractions like I've instead of I have, right? We use slang like gonna. Even my spell check says that's not correct. Instead of going to, okay? Or the word cool, for example, right? So we use slang. We use more idioms, and we speak short form. Okay. In formal language, we use more precise vocabulary, and we speak in more robust sentences. Okay? So, firstly, we need to understand this in the speaking. So, your question was really good, Yextan. Do I use informal or formal language to get those high band scores in the speaking section? And again, my answer is both. Okay. What I mean by both is that you have to use elements from informal and you have to use elements from formal. Okay. So, I'll show you what I mean. So, both means you should use contractions like I've. Just make sure to really enunciate, okay? So the examiner can hear that VE. So don't just go IJA, go I've, right? Really kind of enunciate the contractions so they can hear that. So use your contractions. They like that. That's natural language. You will score better when the examiner can see that, okay, student uses contractions. That's natural language. Okay, use slang. Sometimes people say, oh, you shouldn't use gonna and so on. No, it's not true. Okay, use slang naturally, like gonna and wanna. Mix it with going to and want to. Okay, so you can use them in one sentence. You can say, I'm gonna, this weekend, I'm gonna do this with my friends. And then in part three, in the future, how will technology improve people's health? Technology in the future is going to help people to live longer. Okay, so in the introduction part, you could use a bit of slang, stay a little bit more natural. And then in the more technical questions in part three, you can get a little bit more formal and use going to and want to show that you can master and use both of those kinds of speaking. Now, very, very importantly, okay, from formal language, so using formal language, always work to use specific vocabulary to show lexical resource and speak in robust full sentences using the question. So in this way, Yextan, the IELTS interview is not like your usual type of English conversation. So it's not like the informal language that you would use with your friends on the street. And it's not like the formal English that you would use in a business presentation at a company. It's kind of like a mix of these two, okay? It's somewhat like the language you would use in a classroom among other students and with your professor, okay? In a university classroom, if you're working on a project with other students, this is the kind of language you would use. You would use both formal and informal. Ideally, you're trying to show the examiner both, okay? In the introduction in part one, you have room for a bit more informal language. And then in part two and part three, you should focus more on formal language. Does that make sense? Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? So you're kind of mixing. And of course, you should use idiomatic language. So Yextan, remember those speaking classes where I say, I live in the heart of Budapest? So I don't say I live in the center of Budapest or I live in the downtown core of Budapest. That's okay as well. But I say I live in the heart of Budapest. So I use the idiomatic language, which is informal, but still considered advanced English. Okay? It's a bit awkward to explain, but I think it makes sense for most of you. Okay? Ferdov says, at the exam, can I use a pencil which I brought? That's a really good question, Ferdovs. Yes, you should be able to use the pencil that you brought, unless it's some kind of really weird looking digital pencil. However, some exam centers will provide you with all of the materials you need, and they might say don't use yours. So it kind of depends on which country you're in, what kind of resources that test center has available. Okay. Obviously, there are some test centers that have more equipment, better equipment, and there are some that are not quite as well equipped. You can certainly bring your own pen and pencil and eraser. You should be able to use it, but no guarantees, okay? That could be different. All right. Okay, let me just jump back. I know there were some other questions before as well. All right, after Yextan, Rajveer says, as the thesis is the spine of an essay, that's very well put. It's a very nice metaphor, Rajveer. So, as the thesis is the spine of an essay, how can I come up with strong points for my thesis as the whole essay depends on these points? That's a really good question too, Rajveer. So, here's Rajveer's question. Rajveer, your question is the $1 million question for good academic level writing, especially. Okay, so Rajveer is asking, since the thesis is the spine of the essay, and strong points make a strong essay, what can I do to come up with strong points? Okay, that's a really good question, Rajveer. That's a really, really good question. And it's the $1 million question. For those of you who are doing the IELTS exam to go to university, to go to college, of course, when you're in your classes, it's just expected that you can use English. So that's the basic. What is going to be the difference between an essay in a class between A plus and a C is how good the points of the thesis are. Absolutely. So beyond English, once you have good English skills, this is the epicenter of the value of your essay. So having those good points. So it's a very good question, Rajveer. How do I come up with those good points? Okay. So here you go, Rajveer. Okay. Whenever you have a topic, this is the answer, of course. Whenever you have a topic, and this is the skill that you develop throughout your school years, even at the doctorate, PhD level. So whenever you have a topic and controlling idea, for example, you're presenting an argument in an essay, you need to think of as many points as possible and then choose the best ones. Think specifically and globally. Visualize as much as possible. Ask yourself, if I got the opinion of other people, what would most of them say? Now, another really important point here is make sure that the points are exclusive. This is where many students make a mistake. Okay. So, and we had a really good example of this week. So, I think most of you saw the class this week, or you were in the class with the Task 2 essay that we kind of finished yesterday, except the conclusion about using solar energy, right? So it was the benefits of solar energy, right? And when we were doing our brainstorming, Rajveer, we came up with the concept of abundant, cheap, clean, and some other points, right? So again, we keep visualizing the solar panel, right, on top of maybe somebody's house. Okay. So we see those solar panels, and then we think, here's a person that owns this house. I go and I talk to this person. Why do you have solar panels? What's the reason for it? And then we're trying to visualize and think of what would this person's answers be to the question of why is solar energy so great, right? And then we come up with these answers. Now, as you come up with your different answers for the benefits of solar energy, then once you have a list, you might end up with 4 or 5 more items. You have to make sure that they're mutually exclusive. That means that they're clearly separate points, Rajveer. And remember that I said to students, you have to be careful because these two are not exactly separate, okay? The reason that solar power is arguably cheap is because it's abundant, is because it can be found everywhere. So if you decide that your main points are going to be abundant and cheap in your thesis, then you will write your first body paragraph about abundant. So sun energy can be found anywhere in the world. It will exist as long as the sun exists, and so on. And then you're writing, and then you get to your next body paragraph, Rajveer, and you start writing that it's cheap. Well, why is it cheap? Because it's available to everybody everywhere to collect. And then you go, I'm writing kind of the same information now as I just wrote in my last paragraph. That's not good. That's when in university you want to go, okay, I have to redo my thesis, redo my body paragraphs. In the IELTS, you have less time. You don't have days. You only have 40 minutes. So you have to be very careful to make sure that you have uniquely different points. Okay? But again, Rajveer, lots of practice. So finding the best points and clearly having good parallel grammar and explaining them, that just takes a lot of practice. The more you practice it, the better you'll get. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? I know that was a little bit of a long-winded explanation, but I'm hoping that was clear. Okay? And again, it's something that you can ask any English professor and say, what makes a good thesis or what makes good thesis points? And all of these English professors will say, well, thesis points should be unique, they should be clearly distinct, and they should be top-level choices for that argument. Okay? There's also Greek rhetoric. So Greek rhetoric is the art of argument. I'm not going to get into that in a lot of detail right now, but for those students who really want to go the extra mile, do a little bit of research. Into the methodology of Greek rhetoric. Okay, it's the art of argument, namely pathos, logos, ethos. That's a little bit too big of a topic for me to explain in great detail in this class, but it is the foundation of the scientific argument, using concepts of logic to make arguments. Okay, and that can help you come up with some good points as well. Okay, let's see what we have here. I know that a lot of you are commenting, and I'm just going bit by bit here, question by question. Okay, let's see what else we have. These are some great questions so far today. I can tell many of you were thinking about this. Okay, so, and you're right, Regvir. It's a nice way to see the thesis. It's the spine of the essay. It's absolutely the spine of the essay. Okay. Rosa says, can I ask, where is your offline lessons? Rosa, our company is purely online. We do not have a physical school. We teach online all around the world. So Rosa's asking, do you have offline lessons? The answer, Rosa, is no. All of our teaching is online at the websites, aehelp.com, glshelp.com, on our apps, Academic IELTS Help, General IELTS Help, and on these YouTube channels. Okay, we're all online, Rosa. We're all online. All right. Sheng Hung says, or Shang Hung is saying, I will register for the exam in the first week of March. That's great, Shang Hung. So study hard, okay? If you have any questions, Shang Hung, just send me an email. You've been in my classes a long time. You've learned a lot. So make sure to practice a lot. And Shang Hung, speak as much as possible, okay? Roshni says, the utilizing the listening example in the listening section, is that time reduced? Yes, it is, Roshni. So there's no extra time added because of removing the example. So nope, that time is gone, Roshni. Okay, it's a good question. Yeah, that's makes it a little bit harder, but. Okay, Roshni is asking, sir, how can I improve sentence formation? Very good, Roshni. Okay, so Roshni says, how can I improve sentence formation? Okay, the answer, Roshni, is start simple and build up. Okay, I'll show you what I mean. So on our apps, if all of you have our apps, then you know that almost every single day we send out a new vocabulary to encourage you to learn that for the day. Any of our members using the app, any new words that you picked up from using the app? So in those notifications that you're like, oh, that's kind of an interesting word. Maybe you want to give me one, and then I'll give an example of building sentences for Roshni on how to improve the sentence formation. Joya, there's a really great video on the channel that deals specifically with true, false, not given questions. It's not a class video, it's a pre-recorded video. Okay, Rajveer says the word frivolous. And do you remember what that word means, Rajveer? Frivolous? Okay, so what's the... Yeah, good. I like how a lot of you are picking up words. It's nice to see. So Yaxdan says constrain. Roshni says implicit. That's great. Okay. So frivolous. What does it mean, Rajveer? Do you remember? Yeah, exactly. It means not having serious purpose. Yeah. Okay. So you have this word. Write a simple sentence with it, Roshni. So first thing you want to do is just write a really simple sentence with it. An indirect thesis in task 2 is frivolous. All right. How's about that for combining a lot of the different questions and ideas that we covered today? So an indirect thesis in task 2 is frivolous. Indirect thesis, like this essay will talk about the advantages and disadvantages. It's frivolous because it has no value for your reader, especially if they know the question, right? So it is without having serious purpose in comparison to a direct thesis. Does that sentence is that clear? Okay. So Shang Hung says, yeah, meaningless. So an indirect thesis in task 2 is frivolous. Does that sentence make sense so far? Is that clear? Yes or no? Yeah, Roshni says yes. Okay. So simple sentence. Nothing too fancy going on here. We have subject, verb, object with a little bit of descriptive language, right? So now what you want to do is once you have this sentence, Roshni, then you want to make it a little bit more complex, right? So you can do that in many different ways. You need to practice this, Roshni, and especially focus on those forms of sentences that are challenging for you. So we can just do this. An indirect thesis in task 2 is frivolous because it does not give clarity for the direction of the essay, okay, to the reader. All right. So then, of course, you have to do this, Roshni, according to your skill level, right? So obviously this sentence now is getting much more complex because I'm showing cause and effect, okay? This one does not show cause and effect. This sentence using the word because is now showing cause and effect, and it's otherwise still kind of simple. I'm using present simple tense. So an indirect thesis in task 2 is frivolous because it does not give clarity for the direction of the essay to the reader. This I'm adding on here, right? Okay, and then once you do this kind of exercise, then you can go back and change it even more. How can you change it? By changing the tense. So writing an indirect thesis in task 2 had been a frivolous endeavor by the student as it did not provide the reader with a direction for the essay. Okay, so clearly now I'm enhancing the difficulty of the sentence again. So writing an indirect thesis in task 2 had been a frivolous endeavor by the student. So now I'm using not only past perfect, but I'm also writing it in a passive voice, okay? So here, Roshni, I'm really jumping big or a lot with the complexity or the skill level, the difficulty level, but I'm just showing you what you should practice, okay? And of course, for each of these, as you build your sentences, you want to make sure that your grammar is correct. You can run it through a grammar check program like Microsoft Word or Grammarly, or of course you can get feedback from a teacher or an expert, okay? So, and practice this. This is a really good practice, students, members, for your everyday in both your writing and in your speaking. Start with a piece of vocabulary, a new word, create a simple sentence, then build on that simple sentence, okay? And be able to identify what you're doing. So just like I said here with this past perfect showing cause and effect, using passive voice, so I can identify what my sentence actually is, okay? So that's what you want to focus on. All right, students, those are some really, really good questions for today. I'm going to stop there. I think that's a lot of information. So just a quick overview to recapitulate what we've done. Jessica Run's question, what's the best way to start the introduction, or what's the best introduction for task 2? It's one that follows the standard essay format in English. Hook, background, direct thesis. Okay. Amarjeet, question, what are changes to the IELTS exam in 2020? Mostly the change is to the listening section instructions. You're not going to hear listening sections, you'll hear listening parts. No references to page numbers, no example in part 1. Okay. Rajam Nikam has asked, do I get time, like in the paper-based exam, for the computer-based exam, 10 minutes to transfer answers to the answer sheet? No, you do not. Okay, that's a difference there. Yextan's question, in the speaking interview, should I use formal or informal language? Answer is both. Use your slang, use idiomatic language, use contractions, but speak very clearly and with complete full sentences using the questions in your answers. Okay. Rajveer asked, the thesis is the spine of the essay. How do I come up with strong points? You have to visualize, you have to come up with as many points as possible, and then choose 2 or 3 of the best. Make sure that they're very clearly separate from each other. Try to visualize what you will write with those points. Okay. Rosa asked, do I have offline lessons? Answer is no. All of our materials are online in these live classes. And of course, if you want access to the best materials, join the premium package at aehelp.com and gieltshelp.com as well. Okay, and to improve your sentence formation or forming sentences, write simple sentences and then step by step increase their complexity. Students, I'll have more of these question and answer sessions, members, so write down any questions that I didn't answer today. Of course, you can always email me your questions also. And again, sorry about the network error on the websites in the last 24 hours. We fixed that. Our techs have assured us that everything is good to go. And to say sorry, use the code FIX30 to get a 30% discount just for 24 hours at aehelp.com or gieltshelp.com. For Dobbs, how and where can I get recent questions? You have to search online for Dobbs. The one last point, because for Dobbs is asking that interesting question of where can I find the most recent IELTS questions? Interestingly, I don't think it's useful to look at the most recent IELTS questions because those are exactly the questions that they're not going to ask you in the next IELTS exam. So the IELTS is always looking to ask some new, different questions. So if you're studying the most recent questions that were in the last exam, those will likely be the most different compared to what will be asked in the next exam. Okay, I'll leave you on that note. Have an awesome 30 minutes. I'll be back after that with speaking part 3. See you shortly.